All right, everybody, we're about ready to get going here. So we are really happy to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Denise Pinard. I'm a volunteer with the UC Master Gardeners of Monterey and Santa Cruz counties. And I'm welcoming you today to the program Early Spring Pests in the Garden. As always with our Zoom meetings, just a couple of things that we ask you to do. Specifically, make sure that your microphone is muted. And we also ask, it looks like pretty much everybody's got the routine down here, that you turn off your video. It helps minimize the distractions and keeps our presentation running smoothly. So we really appreciate that. For the best view for you, we recommend using speaker view, but we'll go ahead and let you make your choice on that one. If you have any technical questions, I'm happy to help you. Just go ahead and put a little something in the chat for me, and we'll see if we can't get that straightened out for you. We've got our live transcript option going. So if you'd like a little closed captioning, so to speak, you can go ahead and click on that live transcript button down near the bottom of your screen, and you'll have an additional way to watch the presentation there. Anytime during the program, please feel free to add questions to the chat, and we'll sort of keep track of them as we're going along. And at the end, we'll kind of put them all together and make sure that they're answered for you before we're all done. And as you might have noticed, the event is being recorded. So you'll receive a link to the recording and a link to the slides, I believe, within just a few days after the presentation. So very soon. All right. For those of you who might not be familiar with the UC Master Gardener program, we've been around over 40 years now. We're all volunteers. We work in partnership with the Agriculture and Natural Resources Division of the University of California. We all receive comprehensive training, and our job is to provide outreach and research-based education on horticulture, pest management, and sustainable practices for home gardeners in our local communities. And now that you know a little bit about us, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers, Agustin and Delise.
Go ahead, Agustin.
Okay, thanks for taking the time of your day to join this webinar. Agustin Rodriguez here. I'm part of the class of 2020. I have a full-time job in agricultural technology, and I farm on my spare time. I also go to school, and I will be presenting on some of the principles of integrated pest management.
Agustin is a busy and very knowledgeable guy, so we're lucky to have him. I'm Delise Weir. I've been a master gardener since 2014. It's something I started while I was working and am now blessedly retired. I love growing food and herbs and flowers, and am recently getting into medicinal herbs. And I just love doing this teaching. So thank you all for being here. So we're going to start with a little guessing game. Denise is going to launch a poll. And first we're going to guess what is eating this broccoli leaf. It looks pretty sad. So the poll is up, and why don't we all start by taking a stab at what is causing all this hole and lacy damage on this leaf. Is everybody seeing the poll? Here we go. Getting some feedback. Got a front runner. All right, so the other part of the poll is, what kind of pests do you think you are seeing in your garden? And I'm seeing all kinds of things. So I'm going to end the poll in 1 more minute. Well, let's just end the poll now because people have stopped answering, and let's look at the results here. So can everybody see the results? Someone chat me the answer. Yes, I misspelled caterpillar. Thank you. We were struggling trying to edit that just before the class started. Oh my gosh, it was stressful. And thank you for finding it. So embarrassing. So most people are guessing snails. Other people think maybe it's earwigs that are eating that. And some people think it's caterpillars. Now, without having more evidence, without having more insight into what might be eating it, we cannot decide. And we have to do some research. It's a big research project. So that is the point. And you would use different kind of methods or materials or techniques to address each and every one of these. And they would happen at different times of the year, potentially. So the point of the exercise there, what's eating my garden, is you don't know until you've done more research. And then it's good for us to see that you are seeing a lot of holes in the ground and mounds. So that's clearly you are having some underground vertebrate pest issues, and your leaves are getting eaten, and some plants are just going dead, and you're seeing some insects. We're not going to address insects today in depth. At the end, we'll have half an hour of Q&A, and we will answer any question you come up with to the best of our ability. And happily, we have other master gardeners on the call, so if we can't figure it out, maybe they can. All right, thank you for sharing what's going on with you. We're gonna launch into the principles of IPM, Integrated Pest Management.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to do justice to this topic here. It's really broad in itself, and it could certainly take us an entire day, if not weeks, to cover all the topics. But we'll try to do the best we can to just cover the basics and see if we can give you a glimpse of what it actually entails. So IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management, and in this case, it's a systemic approach to the prevention, suppression, or in some cases, the eradication of what a pest, any kind of pest. A pest could be a vertebrate, invertebrate, a pathogen, or a weed. And in this particular scenario, we're going to be focusing on gophers, snails, slugs, and birds. And as we move along, we'll discuss some of those principles and tell you where to get some help. So if you could go to the next slide. So again, integrated pest management is an ecosystem-based strategy for pest control that focuses on natural control factors through a combination of techniques that are minimally disruptive, using chemicals only as a last resort. And in this particular framework, it is very important to identify your pest. First, by defining what a pest is in your particular situation. In the examples that we had with those leaves, we could talk about snail damage, or we could talk about any one of possible damages to your plants, right? So you would have to determine a specific threshold of what is unacceptable damage, right? Whether this be in terms of economics or in terms of aesthetics, right? So once you've identified your pest and you've decided that it's an undesirable organism that's injuring either your plants or your garden, then you would want to monitor the presence of such pests. So I'm going to take, just as an example, the slugs, which we'll be talking about later as we move along with this presentation. But if you were trying to create an integrated pest management approach to slug management, you would identify the damage that the slug population is creating. You would Also determine the population numbers to see if you can live with a certain amount of slugs, then you would do nothing. If that population of slugs is about a specific threshold, then you would develop a management strategy with specific goals, right? Then you would implement an IPM strategy, right? In this case, the steps that are shown in this slide are to first go and inspect, to take preventive actions. Preventive actions could be finding the right plant and planting it in the appropriate place. For instance, some plants require shade, some plants require full sun, and having the right plant in the right place would prevent the creation of habitats for what will then become a pest, right? Since you've already identified the pest and you analyze the damage, you move on to the strategy or the treatment that you're going to do. Then you would monitor the effectiveness of your strategy. Record your results, document, and figure out what it is that what worked, what didn't work, how long it took you to see results, and generally just what you learned, right? So if we can go to the next slide. Again, once you've identified a pest, or you have a pest, you think that something is a pest, how much damage are you willing to tolerate? Are you comfortable taking a certain amount of damage, or are you looking to keep all your carrots from getting eaten, right? So once you've determined the tolerance level that you have, then you define your strategy, right? And the strategy that follows is the general approach to integrated pest management. So if you can go to the next slide. Now, integrated pest management controls are divided into several categories. There are cultural practices, like we mentioned, having the right plant in the right place. The cultural practices generally have to do with the way you manage your garden. It could be water management, soil management, mulch, pruning. Essentially, it's a number of practices that reduce the establishment, reproduction, survival, dispersal, or the general creation of habitats for those pests, right? So the next level of controls, it's the physical level of controls. In essence, you're looking to exclude, trap, do targeted removal, or any other sort of physical activity such as fencing, netting. There's a list in there that you can look at to prevent the establishment of these pests. You are either killing or removing the pest directly, or you're disturbing or destroying the environment that's suitable for them to inhabit, right? The next level of management is biological management, and that generally relies on the use of natural enemies. This could be predators, parasites, pathogens, and they can be either introduced or they are already existing in the general ecosystem of your garden. It is really important here to know the difference between a beneficial insect and, for instance, a beneficial biological agent and a pest, right? For the sake of discussion, I'll just mention cucumber beetles and ladybugs, right? They're very similar, and it's important to be able to tell the difference between the two so that when you implement your pest management strategy, you are actually targeting the pest rather than the biological beneficials. The last stage of an IPM management strategies relies on chemicals, and it's basically, they could be natural or synthetic chemicals that are used to manage this pest, right? In this case, they could be repellents, they could be fumigants. The general word is a pesticide, and a pesticide includes insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, you name it. Pesticide is the overarching category. So you really want to be mindful of the site of action of a pesticide and the mode of action of a pesticide, right? Like where it works and how it works. And overall, that would be your last resort in an integrated pest management control. The goal again is to reduce the use of this chemical, synthetic or biological control chemicals, so that you can look after not only the environment, human beings, water, air, the overall environment, right? Your pets, etc. So, that's basically in a nutshell, an introduction to integrated pest management controls. So if anybody has any questions, we can start there.
Anybody at this point, just throw them in the chat.
And I know that was like super fast. There's chapter 9 in the Master Gardener's Handbook. It's a good place to look into some of these things. Also, I think like something in the Pest and Garden for the Small Farm, there's a section on each one of the topics that we'll cover them as we move along.
So we got one question about a safer bird netting recommendation. I assume you're talking about how birds can get tangled in the black plastic bird netting. I'm gonna talk about exclusion. Thanks for that. So I'm gonna talk about that when we get to birds.
Let me just add one other thing. As you move along and you identified you go out there in your garden, right, and you look at damage that's created upon your plants and whatnot. It's important to have a certain number of tools handy, like sometimes a handless, sweep nets, notebooks, field guides. There's a lot of field guides that you can get out there to identify specific insects or vertebrates and pathogens and the like, so that you can then develop a program that's specifically targeted to the problem that you have. And I just can't stress enough the importance of identifying the problem.
Yeah, that is true. ipm.ucanr.edu. I just put in the chat. That is the UCANR IPM motherlode. It's got so much information. It's amazing. Okay, let's move on to everybody's favorite pest to hate, gophers. And there are other burrowing mammals. Thank you, Agustin, for that great introduction. It's hard to get your head around the philosophical and sort of abstract version of it. So we're going to do a deep dive into some actual integrated pest management technique with animals and critters of all kinds. So here's gophers and moles and voles. You can see there's size differences. We're going to talk about gophers and moles a little bit. Moles mostly to know that they're not gophers, and how to avoid mixing them up, because they are completely different life cycles and lifestyles. We're not going to talk about field mice or voles. That's a problem that not so many home gardeners have in large numbers. When you do, you really know. And we're not going to talk about ground squirrels. Again, that is kind of field-based. That happens on farms and in big open range areas. There are a lot of them up at UCSC. There are a lot of them around the Master Gardener demo garden, if you've ever been to there in Watsonville, which is surrounded by big open dry dirt. Those are both really terrible vertebrate pests, but we're just going to talk about the ones that are really a big deal for home gardeners in a suburban environment. So how can you tell the difference between Team Gopher and Team Mole? Well, you can tell mostly from the little mound and the damage you can see on the ground. Gophers come up at an angle out of their hole, and they push the dirt out in a crescent-shaped mound. It's very distinctive. It looks like a crescent. They eat plants. They definitely eat plants. They stay underground most of the time. They do come out sometimes. So, you know, they can climb over a bed and get in that way, even if it's underwired. And they are solitary creatures. They have a smallish territory, i.e. about 700 square yards. And they guard that territory from other gophers. Moles, on the other hand, they come straight up out of the ground. The dirt that they make when they come up for air is a volcano-shaped mound, so it's even all around. And they don't eat your plants. They're not the worst thing in the world. They eat grubs and insects, and they eat little invertebrates that are in the top 4 to 6 inches of the soil. So they live deep down in the soil in burrows, but then they also will kind of move around your garden or your lawn with a feeding runway that just disrupts everything and makes it cosmetically not great. And sometimes they will knock plants out of the way and kind of wreck your garden design. But it's really largely cosmetic. And I'm going to encourage you not to be too worried about moles. There are not many moles in a territory. Their territory is up to 2 square miles. So they are also solitary, and they also defend their space. Once you get a mole, you got the mole. It's kind of a good deal. So we're mostly going to talk about gophers. And we just talked about this. We've got the fan-shaped, crescent-shaped mound, and a fresh one is what you're looking for when you want to trap. Sometimes the hole is capped with soil. So you'll see the mound, and then you'll see like a little plug of soil on top of the hole. And sometimes you'll just see open holes. They're like air pocket holes. They're different ones. And usually you see a number of mounds in a group. You know that you have gophers for sure when a plant just goes missing. It kind of disappears down under the ground, or is halfway down, or it's completely wilted overnight and you lift it up and you see the roots been chewed away and it's totally gone. That would be your gopher. This is what the mole damage looks like. So this is how they can wreck your putting green. And this is how they go up, straight up and out as a volcano. Cosmetic damage, don't worry about it. So as Agustin said, you have to know your pest. If you don't know your pest, you cannot get rid of it. We talked a little bit about their lifestyle. One thing you need to know is that they're most active in the spring and the fall. Spring is breeding season. That is now. This is why it's in the spring pest group. And they are having babies now. So even though they're a solitary animal, they will definitely share space with their offspring and to mate. And then you have, you know, up to 3 to 4 pups in the same run for a period of time. And that means if you get a handle on them now when they're prolific, you will have a much better time of it later. But the other thing you need to know is that once you've killed a gopher that is defending its run, you may well get a gopher next door, move right into it. So that's why it seems like there's more gophers than there are, because they just move on in. They eat 60% of their body weight a day. And they are, this is just a fun fact, naturally hemophiliac. So they don't stop bleeding very easily. And in Italy, some old gardeners will put broken glass in gopher holes. We don't recommend that. You'll probably find it next time you're digging in the dirt. And they don't ever drink. They get all their moisture from the roots of your plants that they're eating. And their nest can be down to 6 feet. That's a long ways. But the main run is usually about 1 foot down or less. You'll get these slides afterwards, a couple days after this class, and you will note that there is a little link to the IPM website on this particular creature. I will show you what that looks like. So here is the Pocket Gopher page, and it tells you all kinds of great stuff. So keep an eye out for those little links at the bottom of the pages. All right, so how do you manage a gopher? You've got gophers. I've got gophers. I just found a gopher hole and trapped for it. Probably the most the most expensive yet effective way is to prevent them from happening with physical exclusion. So that's one of those physical IPM processes where you underwire the beds. That can cost money and take a lot of labor and time. Or you plant in baskets. Now I noticed somebody in the chat had done the basket thing and said that they get all ripped up and ruined by, you know, in a couple of years. And that is very true. You get what you pay for. Now this type of basket kind of unrolls up the plant, roots on. There's also the kind that you kind of open up and they are made of chicken wire. Those will all rust out and gophers can get through them within 2 years. If you're going to underwire a bed, you want to use this small 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch hardware fabric. And the best one to use is plastic coated. Again, this is going to cost money, but it's going to last for years, probably 5 years in the ground. So that's important. If you're not doing that, the cultural control process is, can you plant things that gophers don't like? Well, no, they like pretty much everything. They don't eat daffodil bulbs, so you can have that. But it's really hard to find a plant they don't like. I find the best way to manage them, if I don't want to have everything in a basket, is cinches or traps. There's cinch traps, box traps, pincher traps, different kinds of traps. We will look at that in just a minute. And it's always good to have habitat opportunities for biological control. You might want to put up an owl box. You may want to not kill that gopher snake you see in your backyard. And you might find that your cat or dog or even a coyote will come and walk away with a little gopher in its mouth. We have a neighbor cat that we invite to come all the time and takes gophers, and that's awesome. That is not going to solve the problem. That will help, but it will not solve the problem. And if you choose to poison them with baits, then you run the risk of secondary poisoning up in the food chain. And that's usually not a problem with the kind that we buy in the store as consumers, but professionals that do professional gopher and rodent trapping and poisoning, they use a higher grade. We'll talk about that. It's a more lethal type that definitely will concentrate in the higher level predators and could kill them. For cuties. So if you're going to be trapping, let's talk about how you go about doing that. So you're going to go out in your yard and you go, oh, dang, look at those gopher mounds. I know what they are. You need to find a probe. And I'm just going to, for a second, do a little Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing for a second so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to show you a few tools of the trade. So a probe. And I think I have to turn off my background for this. None. There, you can see my messy room. Okay, so this is a nice long probe. You can use one of those straight weeders also, and you're gonna just poke down and you're gonna kind of dig around until you find that you go in, thunk, and you go through, and you can feel that you have hit the main run. If you're going in right where there's a little hole, you may not get the main run. You may get a lateral run that's coming in at an angle. So you want to try and get the main run where they're kind of coming and going. So you need to find something that's long and pokey. Then there are different kinds of traps. This is called a cinch trap. This is about, the design is about 100 years old, and I'm not going to trap it. The good news is that you can put them into an air hole, a hole that's not capped. You can set it, you can put it in, you can set the spring, which I'm not going to do on camera and hurt myself. And it may catch a gopher without any digging. So that's kind of cool. The bad news is I have dogs and they'd be happy to put their little nose in that. So I don't use those. I do use this kind. It's called a Gophenator. And it's odd looking. It is not intuitive to set. I have a video for you to see, but you can do that on your own time, but you'll have a link to it. And this you put inside the run. So you find the run with a probe. And I actually have two of these. They're kind of tied together. A mess. And you put them coming and going. You're putting them facing two directions. You make sure that they have a little string on them so that they don't get taken away by a wounded gopher. Here is, in fact, you can see the difference in size. The Gophenator company makes a gopher-sized one and a mole-sized one. And the mole-sized one is quite a bit smaller. And then for digging, I like to do as little, a little damage in terms of, you know, digging between plants. You don't want to dig up your plants while you're trying to dig a hole to put your stuff in, your gopher traps in. So this is a great tool, helps you dig a narrow hole, helps you find, actually you could use this to find the run potentially. And then it helps me just push the dead gopher back into the run, which is what I do. Some people want to throw it away, but I think we should give it back to the earth. So I'm going to share again. Okay. So you're poking between two mounds. You're finding the lateral, not the lateral run. You're finding the main run. You're setting your traps going two directions. And you're checking them every 12 hours. So they tend to be most active in the morning and the evening. I always set them in the morning or the evening, and then I check them in the morning or the evening. If within 24 hours you have not caught anything, then you probably need to reset it somewhere else. And often the gopher will be extremely bright and will figure out that you're being, you know, setting a trap, and they will backfill with dirt and it will spring. And then you just have to reset it. So here is a long and involved video. It's about 10 minutes on how to find the tunnel. So you look for that when you get your slides. And let's look at the kind of traps you can have. This is the very classic Maccabee Trap. That was actually invented by a guy in San Jose in the 1800s. It's kind of yucky to take the gopher out of it, so I don't use those. It's also a little dangerous. You always wear gloves when you're setting any gopher trap. Promise me you'll do that. These are called box traps. This is called a black hole, and you put these in the tunnel. You have to remove a lot of soil. You have to shovel out a whole bunch of soil to get these guys facing the run. I have heard of people using the black hole kind of in a lateral run, so it's sort of sitting on top of the soil and just kind of plugging the exit. And then they go in trying to keep the air from coming in. But I haven't been successful with that. Some people are. Here's Augustin's favorite. This is called a Gopher Hawk. And I actually got this pokey thing. I won't pick it up again. My probe is actually half of the Gopher Hawk kit. So inside this tube on the right is the probe, and it's kind of nice design. And then the way you set it is you find the main hole, then you use this probe to kind of poke a tunnel down to it. Then you put in this spring-loaded deal and set it in the soil, and it gets anybody coming and going either direction. It's very effective. I just seem to break them. Maybe it's trying to get the gopher out at the end of the day, but these little delicate basket things kind of break for me. So I'm doing something wrong. Don't do that. This is the Cinch Trap that I said I didn't want to, you know, hurt my dogs. It's a very effective trap for many people. A lot of professionals use this. Usually you take a little flag and make sure that you mark where you have set your traps so you can come back later and find them. This one also rusts. So the Gophenator here does not rust. It's stainless steel. It will last forever. This other kind, the Cinch Trap, does rust and eventually gets so kind of crunchy that it doesn't quite spring. And that's part of why I have a problem with those. My goodness, how did I get here? That's not where I wanted to go. Okay, so here is an incredible website. It's called Mousetrap Monday. It's got a new video every Monday about some kind of rodent. It's kind of gross, but this is an excellent video that we're not going to watch right now because we don't have time. Shows you how to trap a gopher.
Well, it's been a while since we caught gophers. And
no, we're not going to do it. And here's another one just like that. That's going to show you how to use the Gophenator. That is going to give you everything you need. What we don't want to do, and here is we don't want to go straight to the poison. You may not like killing gophers. Maybe you can hire a service to do that for you. And there is anticoagulant bait. The only gopher bait that you and I can buy at the hardware store is warfarin. It takes multiple feedings to kill the creature. It dehydrates them. It doesn't kill instantly, and so it's less of a risk to secondary poisoning of your pets and other animals. Professionals can use anticoagulants that are single dose and other kinds of poisons like strychnine. And that is what really gets concentrated in the wildlife. And so if you ever do hire someone to remediate your rodent problem of any kind, you want to make sure that they're not using one of these kind of poisons. Here is some facts on rodenticide. Now, everybody's heard about putting your car exhaust down the gopher hole, putting a hose of water and making it all softer and easier to dig. There are people who pump gas into the gopher run and light it on fire, it explodes. There are people that sit on the porch and shoot at them critters at sunset. There's chewing gum, laxatives. You've heard all these things. And those little vibrators that are supposed to scare the gophers, nah. None of this stuff works very well. The car exhaust is a maybe, but you have to plug up every hole that it can get out. The one bait that I would consider using and have been known to do when they outwit me too many times is a multiple feeding block bait that it's made out of poison grain with the multiple feeding anticoagulant. It is impregnated in wax, so the grain does not rot in the soil as some grain-based baits do. The gophers, you put it in their run, they drag it to their lair where their food pantry is. They chew on it whenever they come home, and eventually they die down deep under the ground. It's sort of follows their typical life cycle and life process to be effective. And then the best thing about it is the next gopher that comes along will find it in the run that they're rehabitating. So there you go. Okay, I'm sure there's some questions going on. Do we want to do that now, or should we hit the rest of the topics?
I think, Delise, the only one that I saw in there that you haven't already covered was you mentioned stuffing the dead gopher down into the hole. Does that discourage other gophers from coming in there, or is it just an ecological, dust to dust thing?
The jury's out. We don't know what gophers think. I don't think there's any evidence that it does, but it might. You never know. It'll smell bad in there, but they would just basically block it off with some soil and call it a day. Decent burial, So I'm thinking it's not that much of a deterrent for them.
All right.
Augustine, do you want to say anything about the Gopher Hawk or anything I missed about gophers? You want to?
No, I
Bring
think you pretty much covered all the bases. I know there was a question on the chat about rabbit repellents or plants that would discourage them. I know that out there in the market there are some repellents, but if you read the ingredients, some of the stuff that's in there, it's not so nice. I think they have dry blood in them as well. It's kind of weird. But alliums, right, like garlic and onions, you can have a barrier of those plants, and that might help repel some of the rabbits.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of information about rabbits, but they are a problem if you got them. Okay, at least they're mostly above ground damagers.
Yeah.
All right, take us away with slugs, snails, and earwigs.
Okay, so this next section, we'll just, again, keep talking about some of the integrated pest management to dealing with snails, slugs, and earwigs. So if you can go to the next slide. Some fun facts about slugs is that they, well, first of all, there's this images here, right? And there's this plants are all displaying different kinds of damages, or perhaps damaged by the same plant species. So, or I mean, animal species, right? The same pest is attacking all those plants. So just to kind of reiterate the importance of identifying the culprit, so to speak, of the damage, right? In the first case, it's an earwig, and the second case is a slug, and then the cabbage butterfly, right? That's the type of damage that we have in there. If you want to go to the next slide. One of the important things in implementing your integrated pest management approach is to study the biology and ecology of any given pest, the life cycle, so to speak, right? And then try to understand at what stages it's most vulnerable, so to speak, so that you can kind of emphasize those stages of the growth cycle of the so-called pest. So in the case of slugs and snails, you know, they're an interesting species, right? They are gastropods, which basically means walking or a foot stomach. They basically evolved out of the ocean, like they're in the mollusk family, like the octopus and all of them. And their blood is green. They can live about 6 years, and their eggs will remain dormant for a large period of time until the conditions are right. Slugs and snails also eat decomposing vegetables, so leaf matter and stuff like that. So they do play an important role in the overall ecology and cycle of nature, so to speak. So, you know, again, you would have to determine what the threshold of damage they are creating in your environment, and then decide when to go ahead and attack them. But the first thing to do once you have identified them as a pest that you want to manage is to go out there and inspect your plants, right? Take a look at the leaves, take a look at the stems, the nodes, the flowers, even down to the roots, right? In determining where the damage is concentrated. And in the case of slugs, you know, they are generally active. Well, they're active at night. During the day, they tend to hide because obviously they don't have a shell like the snails do, and even snails will stay in a cool, dark, and moist environment during the day, and then they will venture out into the world at night and start feeding on those different plants, right? So during the day, go ahead and inspect all your plants and see what kind of damage you have. Then go back out at night and see if you actually see snails, slugs, or earwigs to then carry out an approach for those specific pests. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so again, integrated pest management involves cultural, physical, biological, and chemical controls. And in the case of snails and slugs, hand picking them, it's a physical task that you can do. Always wear gloves. I believe there's been some cases of some sort of disease that they carry that can actually jump onto humans. The name is escaping me at this point, but please wear gloves every time you go out there and pick them. And then are some ways in which you can dispose of them, right? Either in soapy water, put them in compost, put them in the garbage, or other things, right? As far as like cultural controls, you can try to get rid of their habitats, those dark and moist places where they inhabit during the day. Also try to water your plants during the day, early morning, so that the moisture kind of manages to evaporate throughout the day, and it decreases the conditions for slugs and snails to thrive on. Do you want to go to the next one? Okay, so again, cultural and physical strategies, removing their hiding places, placing your garden in the sunniest spot. Again, they like the wet, moist environment. Remove all those objects where they can be sheltered on, and try to do the management of your irrigation so that they don't have all the water that they would like. So next one. This is an example of a trap. So again, mechanical. That particular trap, it's basically a board with two other pieces, raises the top board by about 2 inches or 1 inch in this case, and then the moisture accumulates there, and so during the day, the slugs and the snails would accumulate in that area, and then you can basically go pick that up and then dispose of all those animals as you see fit. There's also beer traps, sugar traps. That in this case, this is what they did. They have a container. They added beer and they buried at ground level, which slugs seem to be quite attracted to beer. There's different conversations about copper strings, whether or not like strips of copper actually work. I know that we talked a little bit earlier, and in some cases, people don't seem to find them all that effective, but it's one of the options that are out there in terms of mechanical sort of approaches to it, right? Rather than moving onto chemical means, right? I guess you can, the objective here is to basically exclude them. Exclusion. Go to the next one. And these are some examples of exclusion where you see that there's covers around the plants, and then there's those strips of copper on the raised beds to prevent the slugs from moving into them. Now, I guess it's just sort of right before we jump into the chemical controls. In terms of biologicals, there's possums and related animals that will feed on snails. Also, lizards will feed on snails, and I think a certain amount of beetles will also do that as well. Now, again, how many slugs you need to have in order to have a welcoming environment for any one of those predators. It's kind of a thing that you'd have to decide, right? But the most common component in some of this chemical controls is iron phosphate, which is safe around dogs, children, and wildlife. It also control earwigs and cutworms. And then those last ones, I'm not very familiar with metalloaldehyde baits, but just knowing that that there are other ways to control the populations of slugs in your garden, would sort of, we would like to discourage you from relying on the chemical approach, right? We figure out another way, so to speak, right? And then, yeah, go to the next one.
I have to point out that Sluggo Plus is on the OMRI approved, so it's an organic control, and it's the spinosad that kills the earwigs in it, which is a biological disease that only affects the earwigs.
Yeah, so there you go, biological control for earwigs, right? So it's a pathogen-based, disease-based control for earwigs. Earwigs, they are avid aphid feeders. So again, it really, a pest will become a pest when it reaches a certain economic or aesthetic damage threshold, and you would have to determine what you're willing to tolerate. Again, earwigs feed on aphids, but some of if you want to go to the next slide, like some of the easiest way to trap them are to just basically, again, like, remove their habitat, right? And then just create a trap. Like an example here is the moist enrolled newspaper, and we'll see some examples of these traps. Another one that's real common is putting that vegetable oil with droppings of bacon grease and whatnot, even though that might actually encourage other visitors to your garden. So consider the options. And I think the easiest, most effective way is to just do the moist roll newspaper or magazine, and then just leave that overnight, and then come in the mornings and scoop them out. So the next page, please. So these are some of the examples of the traps, the newspaper, the bamboo sticks, and the bacon grease. I don't know, do you want to go to the next one? I think I'm seeing a question about
Diatomaceous Earth.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen different examples of how that's been used for slug control. I've seen people use coffee grounds. I've seen them use that particular type of earth, paprika, eggshells, and all those things. But I've also seen slugs just like go right through that, right? I mean, it dries up their body, right? But if it's not if it doesn't completely dry them, they'll just produce that slime, that mucus, and then they will go right over it. So I don't know if you would like to add anything to the discussion on slugs and snails, but that's kind of what I was able to think about in this process.
That was great. The oil can for the earwigs works really well. You've got to sink it down at soil level. They will go in, they will not come out. The beer, not so much for me. My beer, my darn slugs and snails do not like the beer. But diatomaceous earth is actually diatoms from the ocean, little tiny planktonic things that are dried, and I've seen them mostly used because it gets a sharp edge. They're like little sharp, tiny particles that it should be uncomfortable for snails to walk on, but the minute it gets wet, it's not a problem. So they just cruise right over it. And if you're watering plants, it's hard not to get it wet. It's also not good to breathe it. So don't inhale, use a mask or some kind of respirator when you're applying it. It does help to kind of scratch the surface of exoskeletons of certain insects, and it can do damage that way. But in general, it's not a thing that I've so much used or been successful with. Birds. Let's talk about birds. There's not so much you can do because they're birds. I find this time of year, birds can take out a planting. They can just mow down a bunch of seedlings. They can denude a nice big seedling by this damage here. This is actually from my garden. And you can see that it's all coming from the edge. You can see that there's like almost little triangular beak-shaped bites in the leaves. Well, that tells me this is birds, just from the feeding damage and the fact that I saw the birds doing it. And they'll come in flocks, and they'll just come and decimate seeds in the ground. They'll kick the seeds up and eat them as they're sprouting. Delicious, loving it. They'll take out seedlings. So the very, very best thing you can do is cover it. And there are a couple of ways to cover it. It's basically some kind of frame, some kind of net, or I'm going to show you this, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. I'll show it later when we stop the slides, but this is a fabric. You use it for wedding veils. It's called Tulle, and it's really, really light, and it's lets air and water in and doesn't let anything else in. So this is an awesome cover, really cheap, really easy to find. Go to a fabric store, buy it online, get a whole bolt of it, and just lay this over the plants. Then you don't need a frame. And lay it over the lightest, tiniest little seedlings. It's not going to weight it down. And then have a garden wedding afterwards. That's what you should do. So there are different ways that you can do a more permanent kind of framed cage situation. Here's a couple of ideas. You got the TB style, and you put bird netting or something like it. Now, I mentioned earlier that the black plastic bird netting that you buy to put over trees and things like that, birds can get stuck in it, and they can, it's a terrible fate. They get all messed up, and you have to kind of cut them out of it, and they can break wings, and it's not great. So I would prefer, rather than using bird netting, to use that tool, or use something like Agrifabric Grow Fabric. It's this light white non-woven fabric that you can buy in the garden store. Now, if you use that, it kind of does a greenhouse effect underneath. So you wouldn't want to put that over, say, lettuce in the summer or something like that. But we're talking about spring, cool nights, probably not a bad thing. So exclusion is the best way. You're not by law allowed to kill birds, so there's no way to kill the birds, and who would want to do that anyway? You can try to scare them away. There's a million places that sell shiny moving objects that are supposed to disgruntle the birds and make them move on. There are balloons with giant eyes. There are plastic owls. There are things that make noise. And those might work for a day or two, but the birds figure it out and they say, I know that's not a real owl or a real snake or whatever the thing is. And then they just, go sit on it, basically. It's like a scarecrow with crows sitting on it. So if you're going to use those kind of distracted things, here's some DIY upcycle ideas. This moves, it shines. The moving part is important, and the CDs, that just says you're very computer literate, but you still have to move them around all the time, and then you might keep the birds away. So that was our material for today. We came in at just under an hour. Good job, us. Let me tell you a few things before we go into Q&A. We want to do better. We always want to do better. So we have an evaluation survey, and it's going to be added to the chat, please, Denise. And we'd like you to fill that out, and then be forewarned that you will get an email from the California Master Gardeners in Sacramento. and they'll send you another survey, and that will happen within a couple of months. And the questions they're going to be asking is, did you use the information you got on this class? And this is how we make money. This is an all volunteer program, a totally nonprofit program. And it's really important that you give this information back because they use that data to get funders, and we need the money. We have some other classes coming up. We've got container gardening coming up in April. This one's going to be free and virtual, and everybody should come to that. And then we have one that's going to be limited number of people. I think we're keeping it at 30, 35. I can't remember what we said. But that's going to cost a little money, and it's going to be in person at the demo garden in Watsonville. And if you have a pot that needs holes in it, we have an expert pothole driller that's going to be there, and bring your pots and pot them up. It'll be fun. Then we have worm composting. Again, we're going to do a pairing of virtual and in person. So the virtual ones are always free. The in-person ones always make us a little bit of money, and we appreciate that. And we're also working on gray water systems and a citrus class. Those are coming later in the summer. And we have a plant sale. So if the birds do come and eat all your plants, if the gophers do attack everything and you want to start over, please consider our April to May 1st online plant sale. You will just basically order online and then schedule a time to pick them up in Salinas at our UCA&R center at the appropriate appointed time. And here's a little preview of what we're going to have available to us. So lots of different kinds of these things. I think there's about 20 different tomato varieties. There's a whole lot of different kinds of peppers. There's lots of different vegetables and lots of different herbs. And again, different varieties of each. So look for that. It's going to go live soon. Okay, let's take some questions. What's going on, Denise?
Apparently you've done such a good job that we have very few questions. So let's see, the couple that I've seen most recently are related probably more to insects, which I know is not our focus today. There were a couple about white flies. Do you have any just quick comments about that? I know that's not our focus exactly, but.
You go first, Augustine. What do you say?
Are they those cabbage eating flies? It's hard to tell, you'd have to kind of identify the insect, or what are they doing? Like, are you seeing any damage, or are you just seeing flies?
My guess is it's the white fly that's a sucking insect that's related to aphids that is often found in greenhouses. Can you confirm that's what you're talking about? Tiny little flies. Assuming that's what it is, the best organic treatment for that, because they're just going to show up. They just do. If they're in the garden, they're probably not white flies. They might be gnats. Wow, looks like it's snowing, you say. Okay, so here's the trick. You can either buy them at the store, or you can just buy, get a stick, paint it bright yellow. They also have sticky cards that are bright yellow already that you peel off the thing, and then you put a sticky goo on it. So you can put Vaseline, or you can put what's that called? The tacky stuff you put on trees. Gosh, it just flew out of my brain, the name.
Tanglefoot?
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, and put Tanglefoot on the yellow card. Then stick them around the affected plants or in the area, and then go out and shake the plant, and they'll fly up and they'll go whoop, smack into the yellow. And that's really awesome. And do that a couple of times and you should knock down the population. They don't usually do so much damage unless they're in huge numbers that they kill a plant, but they can weaken it. Okay, what else?
All right.
Let me add something to
Okay.
the white flies, I guess. if you find some Alyssum, the plant, that it brings in a parasitic wasp that preys on those white flies. You can also use safer soap, or you can make a mixture of what is it, like Dr. Bronner's soap, very dilute solution, and then try to spray that. And that generally tends to address.
That's a good idea if you can get them to sit still, but they tend to fly around, so.
Right, but you can just put that
Soap
on
is good.
your plant, on the foliage, and because they tend to feed on like the smaller, younger leaves.
Mhm.
So if you can coat it with safer soap, they will avoid it.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Once you have caught a gopher in your a particular hole, is there any point in reusing that same space to set a trap a second time? Or
Once you've caught a gopher, I would wait till there's more gopher damage, because if you caught a gopher, you got the gopher that's in your neighborhood, that's in that run, in that 600 square feet. And unless it has babies that are still in that run, there's no point in retrapping right there. You would wait for gopher damage to help to turn up somewhere else, because either one of the babies showed up to do that, or another gopher inhabited the run.
all right. So there's a question about you recommended wearing gloves with the gopher traps, and the question is it necessary to do that? Does it have something to do with the scent of humans, or is it more of a safety issue?
It's fully a pinch my fingers safety issue. You only have to do it once to know why. Because these things are on really tight springs, and you'll kind of lose your grip, and you can really hurt yourself.
All right. So there's a couple of questions. I'm not sure if this is answerable without, I'm actually going to recommend that they check with our hotline, but there's just this gardener has some little new beet greens, and that they're being deeply damaged. But they thought maybe it was leaf miner. Anyway,
it was in the hotline, you say?
No, I was going to recommend that they check with our hotline.
Oh yeah.
Because it's hard to know without seeing it what the problem is. That go with where you're thinking?
Yeah, if we don't know more, it's hard to tell, and a picture is 1,000 words.
Okay, I'm going to put that link right in there in just a second here. All right.
It's also right here. Da, 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 da.
Oh, there you go.
So we don't actually pick up a phone so often. It's more of an online thing. And click this link and you will be connected with the hotline, and you can ask pretty much any garden question you like, and we will do our best to answer it.
All right. Let's see. There are many little helpful hints going on here from other gardeners, which is fabulous to see. Do you have any comments about eliminating the white moths? Like it sounds like maybe cabbage moth kind of thing.
Cabbage butterfly, the European cabbage butterfly, white one with a little black spot. Happens in the summer and the fall. Agustin, do you want to speak to that one?
No, quite frankly, I don't do a whole lot of active pest management with any chemical or any other ingredient. I generally allow the pest to get to a specific threshold, and then if they get past a certain point, then I tend to just harvest my plant. You know what I mean? But I try not to use any chemical inputs. And if I can find like a biological predator or parasite or a pathogen for that specific pest, then I just live with it.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. Everybody has their threshold. And I would say that home gardeners have less real estate to lose. They have less vegetables that they're willing to sacrifice potentially than a farmer. So for those of us that can't bear to let our broccoli go to the dogs, so to speak, the best way to exclude flying insects is to exclude them. So that's your tool or your netting, your agrofabric, putting something over it to keep the butterflies, the whatever flying insect, maybe it's cucumber beetles that are coming in with a disease for your squash. There's all kinds of flying things and birds, of course. That's the best way to keep them from doing damage, is keep them away from in the first place so they don't do the damage. They can't get in. And then once you do have, let me just say that if you don't do that, if you didn't do it in time or you wait too long, the white cabbage butterfly is an especially obvious pest because you can see it flying around. It lays its eggs on the undersides of greens, usually in the broccoli or cabbage family. Brassicas are its favorite, but it'll also lay eggs on lettuce and other plants. And if you just kind of go out there and every other day look under the leaves and see if you've got little worms, they're bright green, they're velvety, they're really hard to miss. And you can see that they're chewing the underside of the leaf, and you just squish them or pick them off.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
there are possibilities to introduce like ladybugs or praying mantises, and they sell you this. There's nurseries will sell you like a batch of eggs that are just about ready to hatch, and you can always introduce those things to your garden.
And for caterpillars like that, there's something called Bacillus Thuringiensis, which is or BT, and it's a natural disease that only caterpillars get. So you can spray that if it's really heinous. I mean, I've never used BT because it's never gotten that bad, but if you need to, you can do that. It's an organic OMRI certified product. And OMRI means Organic Materials
Review Institute.
Thank you.
But you know, just on that note, like I'm an organic farmer. I'm actually a commercial farmer, and an OMRI certification, while it's less quote unquote damaging to the environment, is nonetheless intended to kill. So I think that the principles of integrated pest management are to reduce the overall impact of our farming or gardening on the air, the water, the soil, and etc. Right? So reduce the contaminants and pollutants that we put out into that environment. So sure, OMRI Organic Materials Research Institute does a great job at approving and setting standards for what can be used in a certified organic system, but it is nonetheless a biologically derived sort of poison, right? Like it's kind of like putting nicotine into a spray so that you can kill specific pests. So
yeah, so that's a really good point. A lot of these organic certified pesticides are general, and they'll kill the good guys and the bad guys.
Yeah, that's also very important, right? Like you want a broad spectrum or a specific, right? Because you're trying to target a specific pest, but in the process, you're just wiping out everything else.
Would you mind putting that acronym in chat, please, and what it means? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Sure.
Thank you.
OMRI. And yeah, so BT is specific to caterpillars. It's the only thing it'll kill. And that's the good news. Anything else? Oh, somebody's saying that Alyssum will encourage beneficial insects, and that's lines up exactly what Agustin was saying. You need a very diverse garden with lots of flowers and nectar and habitat for the beneficial insects to have a balanced environment that will prevent some of these things from being a problem in the first place.
Are there specific other plants besides Alyssum that you would recommend?
There's a gazillion. That's why I sort of went off to, it's got to be a diverse planting with herbs and flowers and vegetables and specific pollinator plants. There's just a really long list. I think that's a class that wants to happen. Yarrow is a good one. Anything that's flowering, it's good. The umbelliferes, that's like carrots and Queen Anne's lace and yarrow, they have sort of a platform with a bed of lots of little tiny flowers. Those, I'm told, are the best for pollinators and beneficials.
All right. There was one question, my goodness, it was quite a while back, about where to order plants. And I believe that meant in our plant sale. And so I believe we should go to the MBMG site. And when it is ready.
Charlene is on the call. Charlene is the queen of the plant sale, one of them, and she can tell us all about it. Can you unmute, Charlene?
Yes, I can unmute. I just can't be seen.
Very well.
Our online platform is Shopify, and it will the link will be on the MBMG Monterey Bay Master Gardener website. A bit ahead of the sale. You just can't get in until April 18th, and there won't be a password or anything. It's open to everyone. And if you live far from Salinas, there are some possibilities for some deliveries. So you don't have to, being able to drive to Salinas doesn't have to be the breaking point for you if that's impossible, if you're full-time working. So we'll have all kinds of the seasonal vegetables and the annual and perennial herbs. You saw a list there, but the focus of our sales, our last 3 sales have been water-wise, drought tolerant, and heavy pollinator, just because that's, then we're not giving a mixed message. And so even the annual flowers we have are largely self-seeding and absolutely, excellent companion plants for edible gardening. So all kinds of selection, and we'll try to have pictures for everything so that you can kind of mix and match size-wise with what you're growing to eat. I already forgot the question. Did I answer it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just were going to tell us all about the plant sale and how we can get to it.
April 18th, May 1st. There you go.
And go to mbmg.org.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Master Gardener website in our area. Hey, I wanted to point out to you guys that the UCSC Farm and Garden is having a Gopher class too, and that's on April 5th. There's a virtual one with Thomas Whitman from Gophers Unlimited. No, Gophers Limited is the name of his business. And he's a service that will come and limit your gophers and come to your house and trap. He's also doing a hands-on gopher clinic where you can actually get down and dirty with traps on April 9th. So there's that. All right, Denise, what did we miss? Anything else?
I think we have caught them all. All the questions, not all the gophers, sadly.
Thank you for all the great suggestions people are offering in the chat. This is great. 2 questions.
I was wondering if I could share a quick photo of a pest I can't identify. Looks like scale, but it's not.
I'm not sure how you would share a photo.
Let me try that.
He could send it through the chat, right?
Yeah, oh, send
Yeah.
it to the chat. There you go.
Oh, I thought it would be the screen. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, you have to be a co-host to do that.
Ah,
Oh no, you can do it. Look at that.
all right. So that looks like scale, but when I put it under a microscope, the damn thing's got wings. What is this? This is the underside of the leaf. And on the
Yeah.
top part of the leaf, it shows that. So it's evidently doing something internally within the leaves. And this happens to be on a jalapeno plant.
On a jalapeno.
Yeah, so it was just very bizarre. So once I pulled that thing.
Is the one on
off-
the right the same insect?
Yeah, it's like soon as I pulled this off, the underside of the leaf, this thing kind of expanded. And it's like, oh, it's got wings. What the heck is that? Anyway, I'll stop sharing, but thank you very
And
much.
they're sedentary and they don't fly.
Don't know. Got wings.
But I mean, they're not flying around. You don't see them moving.
Oh, well, I don't know. They could be flying around. I have no idea. I haven't seen that.
I would send that to the hotline.
I will. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. This has
know,
been really great. Great experience. Thank you.
It could also be like one of the stages of the life cycle of that flying thing, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, it was just weird that after I scraped it off, all of a sudden it just opened up and had wings. It was very weird. Thanks again, everyone.
Okay, I think we should call it a wrap. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for all your good input. Use the hotline, consider the plant sale, and we look forward to seeing you at other classes.
Thanks, everybody,
you,
for
Agustin.
being here.
And thank you, Denise.
Of course.
Good class.
Thank you so much. Great presentation.
Take care.